Discover the incredible journey of mountain men, how they touch lives by building hidden cabins. Jake Thompson, a weathered soul at 34, sat on a splintered log, the weight of memories heavy on his heart. Once a proud soldier, he now toiled as a humble carpenter on the fringes of that small Appalachian town, where the rolling hills cradled secrets and sorrow. He watched, with his calloused hands resting on his knees, as families struggled around him, caught in a cycle of poverty that seemed to close in like a fog. These were his neighbors' people clinging to hope, even if it was fraying at the edges. One day, traversing a dilapidated construction site, Jake stumbled upon rows of abandoned houses, their weathered frames sagging in despair. He felt a spark, a flicker of inspiration igniting his core. These forgotten places, once homes filled with warmth and laughter, could be revived. Something clicked deep within him. Perhaps he could build them into hidden cabins, sanctuaries for struggling families and the homeless. A chance at redemption not only for him, but for the entire community. Fueled by his vision, he rallied fellow veterans and townsfolk. They accepted his invitation with weary hearts. But hope was a powerful force in these hills. With every hammering impact and nail-driven, camaraderie blossomed. They laughed, exchanged stories, and forged bonds stronger than the timber they worked with. The air turned electric, charged with purpose. Each piece they restored felt like a piece of their own fractured lives coming together again, but not everyone shared their enthusiasm. Local business owners, eyes sharp and greedy, saw the hidden cabins as a threat. They worried about profits lost, the flow of tourists disrupted. Tensions flared, dividing the town as the mission to heal became a point of contention. Memories of his estranged brother seeped into Jake's thoughts, an entrepreneur thriving in the cutthroat world of profit. They hadn't spoken in years since their fallout, but Jake could feel his brother's disapproving gaze looming large. Just as the effort seemed on the verge of collapse, the ground shook from the weight of the past. A community tragedy resurfaced, revealing hidden grief and whispers long buried. The old tales flickered like wisps of smoke, something that had tied every family together in their suffering, a haunting loss that broke hearts. For Jake, it stirred something raw and unresolved. Tears brimmed in his eyes, as he confronted the truth he had been running from. This was more than just a mission. It was about mending the broken pieces of a shared history. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. As the community gathered for a moment of remembrance, a collective breath hung in the air. Could the tide of forgiveness wash over their struggles? Would it illuminate the path toward healing? Jake felt the pulsating energy of shared grief and the flickering flame of hope intertwining. He stood there, heart racing, caught between ambition and despair. The fate of the hidden cabins, forging redemption or merely reflecting fracture, hung in the balance. Would the mountains yield a new beginning, or would history keep them shackled to old wounds? The soft murmur of the crowd surrounded Jake as they shared stories of their past, the air thick with emotion and the scent of pine. Old tears mingled with new ones, washing the bitter memories away, if only for a moment. Standing at the center of it all, Jake clenched the log he'd been sitting on earlier, grounding himself amid the storm of feelings. He felt the burden of their shared grief wrap around him like an old, familiar blanket, a mixture of sorrow, regret, and the burgeoning hope for something better. "Jake!" A voice broke through, cutting sharply through the air. It was Clara, a fiery woman known for her indomitable spirit. "We need to think about what comes next. This moment cannot be just a moment." She was right, and Jake's heart quickened at her words. With Clara's call to action, the townspeople began to discuss their next steps. Some proposed forming a committee to oversee the cabins project, while others argued it was time to confront those threatening to pull it all apart. Jake could see the passion igniting in their eyes. They wanted more than just a fleeting moment of togetherness. They wanted change. As night crept in, lanterns flickered, casting golden light on their faces. Jake's pulse raced as he felt inspiration surge through him. This was what they needed, a vision that bound them all together. He stood up, silencing the crowd with a simple gesture. What if we held community workshops? We can teach each other skills, share resources, and get back to the roots of who we are. Building more than cabins. We'll build connections. His voice wavered but held a determined warmth. Applause broke out. The sound built, echoing off the hills and wrapping around them as a promise. Hope tangled with the crisp evening air. They began to gather around him, eagerly discussing ideas and making plans, each person offering their strengths. From lumber to tools, from teaching to leading, they began to paint a picture of what could be a vibrant tapestry of support woven together by hard work and love. Just then, a shadow fell across the gathering. Out of the darkness stepped his brother, Mark, clad in a crisp suit that felt far too formal for the rustic setting. The divisive energy he carried washed over the crowd and dimmed their excitement. Whispers fluttered around like startled birds. Jake's heart sunk. Had he come to sabotage everything? What is going on here? Mark challenged, his voice sharp as a knife. It cut through the enthusiasm, threatening to slice the fragile thread that had just begun to weave their community back together. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Memories of past fights rushed back every harsh word they'd exchanged. I'm not here to fight, Mark continued, trying to soften his approach. I'm curious. But you're stepping into a world you don't understand. This project, it doesn't make sense. No, it makes perfect sense, Jake shot back, anger fueling his words. It's about healing, Mark. It's about building something that matters. The ground they stood on felt alive with tension. Mark's disbelief only angered him more. Jake took a steadying breath. Could he bridge this rift? Could he show Mark the heart that pulsed within this community, within himself? As Jake searched his brother's eyes, something flickered within him, a flicker of possibility. If you're here to help, then help us, Jake implored, vulnerability breaking through the bravado. We can't do this alone. Silence fell, heavy and charged. Would Mark join him in this fight for their hometown, or would he continue to walk a path of division? Jake recognized a pivotal moment looming ahead. Could the mountains cradle a glimmer of reunion, or would it shatter their already fractured bond? The question hung in the air, ripe with potential. Mark's silence stretched like taut string, a tension that crackled in the night air. Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he waited for a response that felt like it might never come. The crowd, poised and eager, seemed to hold its breath along with him. Finally, Mark softened his stance, the sharp edge of his expression dulling ever so slightly. Jake, his voice was tentative, as if testing the waters before diving in. I want to understand, but you're talking about something bigger than just a few cabins. This is a commitment. This is a risk. Every risk is a chance, Jake countered, passion rising in him. If we don't take this step, then what do we have left? Just memories of what once was. He looked around, his gaze sweeping across the faces illuminated by the warm glow of lantern light. Faces filled with hope, dreams, and a yearning for community. This was more than just a project, it was a lifeline. But Mark shook his head, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. You don't know what challenges you'll be facing. People aren't going to just come together because you say they should. You'll have to fight for every inch. Then let us fight together, Jake urged, taking a step forward. If we don't stand united now, we'll lose everything that makes this place special. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara, sensing the stirring potential, stepped beside Jake. We've all lost so much, Mark. But tonight we've found something worth fighting for. Look around you. She gestured to the gathering, where hands reached out, faces alight with determination. We want to rebuild what was lost, and we can do it together. Mark's eyes slowly scanned the faces of the townspeople, those who had grown beside him, shared memories with him. The walls he had built around himself began to tremble, just a little. Jake saw the glimmer of connection, a flicker of realization reflected in Mark's gaze. "You really believe this can work?" Mark asked, sounding almost incredulous. "We have to believe," Jake replied, his voice steady. "Together, we can be stronger than any challenge that stands in our way." The crowd erupted in a chorus of agreement. Their voices blended together in an unyielding wave, lifting each spirit and creating momentum that felt unstoppable. Mark's expression softened more, though a shadow of doubt still flitted across his features. Jake could almost see the gears turning in his brother's mind. "All right," Mark finally said, the weight of his tone shifting as he began to embrace the prospect of collaboration. "I'm in. But we're going to need a solid plan, and we need to be ready for whatever comes at us." Relief washed over Jake like a warm embrace as the crowd cheered and the emotional pulse surged back to life. "Yes. We'll start working on a plan together. One step at a time." But as enthusiasm bloomed in the night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that struggle still lay ahead. Would their unity hold against the friction that would inevitably arise? And what about the outside forces that threatened their community? As they began to outline their next steps, Jake's thoughts were a whirlwind. He shared his vision to gather resources, but his heart weighed heavy with uncertainty. The night may have sparked a flicker of hope, but the path ahead was still uncertain, shrouded in shadows of doubt and conflict. And just as plans began to crystallize, a distant roar of an engine broke the moment, echoing like an ominous reminder. Jake glanced towards the darkness beyond the gathering, a creeping fear gnawing at him. "What was that?" someone whispered, the smile on their face fading. Jake felt a knot tighten in his gut, fear and resolve battling within him. Were they prepared for what was lurking just beyond the edge of their renewed hope? What challenges were ready to confront them, and would their fragile bond withstand the storm about to break? The answers lay ahead, waiting ominously in the shadows. The roar grew louder, cutting through the excitement like a knife. Faces turned, eyes wide, all searching the shadows for a glimpse of whatever had intruded on their moment of hope. Panic flared briefly, sparking whispers and darting glances among the crowd. "Everyone stay calm," Jake called out, forcing his voice to carry above the escalating hum of anxiety. "We need to know what's out there." Mark, standing beside him, seemed to regain his composure first. "Clara, could you help us make sure everyone is safe? Keep everyone close." His authority seeped back into his tone, galvanizing the crowd. As Clara nodded and began ushering people together, Jake's heart raced. He stepped toward the edge of the gathering, peering into the encroaching darkness. The sound of the engine was unmistakable now. It was heavy, powerful. It was wildlife. It was something man-made, something that could mean trouble. "Jake," Mark said, his voice low but urgent, "we should get ready. If it's trouble, we need to protect this place. The people's spirit is worth fighting for." Jake turned, meeting Mark's intense gaze. There was a fire there that hadn't been present just moments before. It gave him strength. "We're ready for anything," Jake replied, feeling the weight of responsibility. "But what if it's someone just passing through? We don't want to escalate things unnecessarily." Glimmers of headlights began to pierce the darkness, slowly revealing a massive truck lumbering into view. It rolled to a halt a few yards away, engine rumbling into silence. The air thickened with uncertainty, the crowd's whispers fading to tense silence. "Stay put," Mark instructed, positioning himself in front of Jake. "I'll go talk to them." Wait, Jake protested, but Mark was already striding toward the vehicle. He didn't turn back. The tension was palpable, and as Jake watched his brother approach the truck, he felt dread pull in his stomach. The driver's door creaked open, and a figure climbed out. As the beam of the headlights washed over the newcomer, Jake's breath hitched. The man wore a hard expression and a heavy jacket that suggested he was no stranger to harsh conditions. "Who are you?" Mark asked, arms crossed defiantly. The stranger squared his shoulders, pushing a dark hat back off his forehead. "Name's Ray. I heard there was a meeting here tonight. Thought I'd see what all the fuss was about." Confusion rippled through Jake, and he hurried to Mark's side, his pulse thrumming anxiously. "And what is it you want, Ray?" "This isn't the time for random visitors." Ray chuckled softly, but it had an edge to it. "Just wanted to see if the rumors were true. Word gets around fast in these parts. You folks think you can bring this place back to life? That old cabins can just be rebuilt out of thin air?" Jake felt every heartbeat drumming wildly in his chest. "We can build them together," he said, fists clenching at his sides. "And we will." Ray's eyes narrowed, a challenge lurking there. "You think it's that easy? There are people who don't want to see you succeed. You've stirred something up. Be careful." Before Jake could respond, the whisper of wind swept through the crowd, mingling with the lingering tension. Mark shot Jake a glance, silently asking for preparation. This was no ordinary visitor. The weight of Ray's warning hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. "Time to put that plan into action," Jake murmured, determination flooding through him. But fear curled in his gut. Who were those people Ray spoke of? Who were the ones threatened by their hope? Little did they know, this was just the beginning. What adversities loomed might shake the very foundation of their resolve. As they stood there, the chill of uncertainty creeping into their bones, Jake knew they had to brace for the worst. Would they still find strength in each other, or would the shadows ahead snuff out the light they had just ignited? The answers loomed like distant thunder, heavy with potential danger, whispering on the winds of change. An awkward silence wrapped around them as Ray studied the crowd. He seemed to relish the storm of uncertainty he had conjured. Jake's eyes flicked to the people gathered behind him, huddled together. Clara, her face set but concerned. The children clutching their mothers, even the older folks, voices hushed and eyes filled with worry. This was their moment, and it felt fragile, as if a single wrong decision could shatter it. "Listen," Mark finally said, breaking the tense air. "If you're really here just to see what happens, that is fine. But if you're causing trouble, you should know we want to back down." Ray's lips curled into a slight smirk. "Trouble? I'm not here to cause trouble. Just to see how strong this little community really is." Jake felt a jolt of anger. What did this man know about them? They were more than a promise of hope. They were families, determined to build a future from the fragments of the past. "What is your angle, then?" Jake asked, stepping forward. "You come slinging threats without a hint of what you mean. Do you want to help? Because we could use it." The challenge hung in the air. Ray raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You really think you can just rebuild everything? This place has its ghosts. It's not all sunshine and rainbows." Jake shook his head, his voice firm. "Every family deserves a chance to fight for their home. You can call it naive, but we believe in what we're doing." At those words, the crowd behind Jake stirred. Clara nodded in support, her determination shining through the apprehension in her eyes. People began to step forward alongside Jake, aligning their solidarity. Faces softened from fear to a kind of fierce hope, making Jake's heart swell a little. "Well, if that's your thing," Ray said, studying them as if they were a curiosity. "Just know that actions have consequences. This community isn't as isolated as you think. There are eyes watching. There are people who'd rather see it all burn." "Then we'll fight fire with fire," Mark added, standing tall beside Jake, the two of them now a united front. "If you care about your presence here making a difference, you could lend a hand instead of lurking in the shadows." Ray contemplated, an amused expression flickering across his face. "You're brave or foolish? I'm curious to see which one it is." Suddenly, the low rumble of a second engine broke through the night, a sound only intensifying the crowd's anxiety. Jake's stomach knotted, and he took a step back, eyes darting to the incoming headlights. What now? Another truck rolled into view, smaller but no less menacing. The darkness swallowed it up for a moment, before the headlights illuminated more figures spilling out. Ray crossed his arms, that sly grin resurfacing. "Looks like trouble just found you," he said, amusement dancing in his eyes. Jake clenched his fists, feeling adrenaline flood his veins. "Mark, we need to protect everyone." "What are they doing here?" Mark asked, scanning the newcomers with a sharp gaze. The crowd had transformed from fearful to alert, whispers rising again as they braced for the unknown. As the newcomers approached, Jake's heart thudded painfully, each beat screaming for them to remain strong. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, revving up their resolve. What if this was it? What if they did have to face the opposition that Ray hinted at? "Stay together," Jake shouted, voice steady despite the chaos rising inside him. The people behind him leaned in closer, their collective energy a shield against the uncertainty. But deep down, Jake knew, the battle ahead would be about more than the cabins. It would be about their very spirit. He stole a glance at Ray, who seemed to enjoy the unfolding drama. The fire of uncertainty lit his eyes. Would he choose to stand with them, or let the danger edge closer? In that charged moment, Jake felt a flicker of fear mingling with a rush of galvanizing confidence. They couldn't just stand by anymore. Time was running out, and the true fight was just about to begin. What were they willing to stand for, and how far would they go to protect their home? The tension hung thick in the air as the newcomers stepped forward, their figures stepping out of the shadows like ghosts from the very past Jake was desperate to leave behind. Their intentions were shrouded in darkness, and every instinct in him screamed to keep his friends close and ready. "Who are they?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the low rumble of the engines. Jake glanced in her direction, catching the slight tremble in her hands. "Not sure," he replied, trying to sound calm. "But we can't let them through." The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The safety of their community rested heavily on his shoulders, and he felt the collective breath of the crowd behind him, each person searching for strength in one another. Ray seemed to bask in the chaos. He looked casually amused, as if this was all a game to him. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you don't need me at all. Looks like your little band is quite prepared to rumble," he said, taking a step back to watch the scene unfold. Jake lifted his chin, unwilling to show any fear. He scanned the faces emerging from the second truck. There were 4 of them, their expressions hard, eyes narrowed. Silence swept over the gathering. It was an invisible wall, pushing everyone further together. The tension was alive, pulsing beneath their skin. "Listen up," Jake shouted, taking a bold step forward as adrenaline surged through him. "If you're here to threaten us, you better know we're ready to fight for what we have." The words echoed, filled with passion, spilling out from a place deep within. One of the newcomers, a tall man with an intimidating presence, stepped closer. "Fight for what, exactly?" he scoffed. "Look around you. This place is falling apart. You think you can save it?" His laughter was cold, cutting through the air like a knife. "We have to try." Clara stepped up beside Jake, her voice rising above the murmurs. "These cabins mean everything to us. Our families, our hopes, this community is built on love and support. We will not let you destroy that." The crowd reacted to her words. A ripple of approval spread through them, emboldening their spirits. One by one, people began to nod, some clenching their fists in anticipation. Even Mark moved closer, ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with Jake and Clara. Love? The tall man mocked, shaking his head. Love doesn't he protect you from what is coming? You think this is just about you, don't you? This is bigger than all of you. You have no idea what forces are at play. Then enlighten us. Jake challenged, his heart hammering in his chest. What is your plan? What do you want with us? The tension around them twisted, the air thick with uncertainty, as the newcomer's lips curled into a sly smile. You'll find out soon enough. Consider this just a warning, he said, taking a step back, hands raised in mock surrender. But remember, everything comes with a price. The crowd was tense, their murmurs rising again. Clara's eyes flared with concern, and Jake felt his heart drop. There was no way to prepare for the chaos that could come from this. Stay vigilant, he called to everyone. We can't let our guard down. Whatever happens, we stand together. As the newcomers turned, retreating to their truck, a heavy silence filled the space where they had stood moments before. Jake felt exposed, but the strength of his community was like an anchor. They had spoken their truth, but at what cost? Would they be able to withstand whatever dark shadow was creeping toward them? Jake faced Ray, whose smirk had finally faded. So, are we ready to come together now? Jake asked, determination burning in his eyes. Ray shrugged, a flicker of intrigue crossing his face. Let us see how deep this commitment runs. The storm is just beginning. With that ominous remark lingering in the air, Jake's stomach twisted. The night felt colder, the threat closer than ever. They were standing at the edge, but what awaited them in the gloom ahead? And most importantly, would they emerge stronger, or would this be the reckoning that shattered everything they had worked for? The night stretched on, dark and unpredictable, as whispers began to swirl amongst the crowd like fog creeping over a lake. Jake felt the weight of uncertainty settling over him like a heavy blanket. The threat had been made clear, but the implications were still far too murky. Do you think they really mean it? Clara's voice broke through his thoughts, low and shaky. She looked to Jake, searching his face for some kind of reassurance. But he found himself at a loss for words. What could he say? Her fear mirrored the ache in his stomach, a feeling that something far worse was looming just out of sight. The crowd began to disperse slightly, retreating into their respective groups, murmuring about what had just happened. Jake watched as uncertainty etched into their features, shadows of doubt clouding their usually hopeful eyes. He spotted Mark, conferring with a few others, gesturing animatedly, as if he could shield them all with convincing words. Jake? Ray's tone shifted, dropping the playful facade as he stepped closer, breaking the bubble of tension. This isn't just about you or this community. There's a lot in motion beyond this little world you built. The seriousness in Ray's gaze stopped Jake in his tracks. What are you talking about? Jake snapped, anger flaring up. Ray had often been the unpredictable element in their plans, but the stakes felt too high for games now. There are things we can't control, Ray continued, a shadow passing over his face. You either adapt and figure out how to meet the storm head-on, or you risk losing it all. The hint of concern in Ray's words was alarming. Jake glanced back at Clara, who was now standing by herself, lost in thought. He could see the fear creeping back into her features as she watched their friends. The questions danced in their minds, but there were no solid answers. We need to convene, Jake said suddenly, rallying his energy. The people need to know what we're facing. United, we stand a chance. What are you going to say? Ray challenged, crossing his arms defiantly. That love will save them. Because I think you might find that isn't enough. Enough with the negativity. Clara shot back, her voice sharper than before. If we don't have hope and unity, what do we have? The sharpness in the air began to shift as Jake took a breath, sensing the fragile thread of resolve beginning to weave back into the crowd. We'll meet in the main cabin, gather everyone. Bonds can be forged from the chaos, he declared. It's our only chance. With slow nods, the handful of allies around him began to agree. Moments later, Jake felt himself slipping into the role of a leader he hadn't wanted to be, one history had thrust upon him. He studied Clara's face as she gathered herself, determination blooming behind her fear. As they began to assemble their friends, each person trickled in, bearing the weight of their own concerns. The room buzzed with an electric, uncertain energy. They looked to Jake, and he braced himself, realizing the gravity of the moment ahead. Standing before the gathered community, he felt the weight of their gaze like an anchor. "We may be facing something we've never encountered," he began, taking stock of their faces. "But we stand stronger together than we ever will apart. We fight for the homes we've built, and the people we love. I won't tell you that love is enough," but suddenly, a loud crash interrupted their gathering. The door to the cabin slammed open, revealing one of the newcomers, wild-eyed and out of breath. "You have to hide," he gasped, cutting through the tension. "They're coming for you." Panic rippled through the room. Clara's hand clenched at her side, and Jake's heart raced, teetering on the edge of dread. "What do you mean?" he shouted, desperate for clarity. The newcomer took a step in, urgency in his voice. "They know you're here, and they won't stop until they get what they want, and you won't like their price." Hope crumbled as fear took its place. What would their next move be in the face of impending danger? Would they still be able to stand together, or would fear scatter them to the winds? The choices ahead felt like a tangled web, with none easy to navigate. And with the storm closing in, Jake realized time was slipping away, and they had to decide quickly what they were willing to sacrifice to protect everything they held dear. The urgency in the newcomer's eyes sent a jolt through Jake. He scanned the faces around him, each alive with panic and uncertainty. The moment hung heavy. "We need to act now," he shouted, trying to cut through the chaos. "Clara, get everyone into the back room. We'll barricade the door." Clara jumped into motion, her fear fueling her determination. She rallied their friends, ushering them away from the main room, her voice a steady anchor amidst the tidal wave of tension. Jake faced the newcomer, who was still catching his breath. "Who are they? Why are they coming for us?" The questions poured out, slicing through the fog of worry. "They're hunters," the man replied, rubbing his hands together, as if to draw warmth from his own fear. "But not the kind you think. They come to claim what they believe belongs to them." His eyes darted to the window, seeing shadows moving outside. "They'll take anyone who stands in their way." Jake felt his heart thud painfully in his chest. "What do they want?" "Control. Power. They think they have a right to everything." A harsh laugh escaped the newcomer's lips. "But they don't know us. They don't know what we've built here." Standing tall, Jake made a decision. "Then we show them. We protect what's ours. Call the others in the back room. It's time to plan." The man hesitated, apprehension clouding his features, but Jake noticed a spark of something else, a glimmer of hope, perhaps. The community had strength when united. "If we do this right, we can fight back together," Jake urged. The urgency, the deafening footsteps approaching outside, took hold of the group in the back room. Clara's hand, a warm comfort on Jake's arm, gave him the push he needed to lead. As faces emerged from the shadows, Jake felt the swell of their resolve. "Listen, we've faced a lot together. We can't let fear take away what we've built," he spoke, his voice steadying. "Here's the plan." Jake laid out their options, outlining both defensive and strategic measures. Some nodded vigorously, while others wore expressions of doubt and fear. But Clara stood firm, her presence steadying the group around her. "What if we fail?" A voice piped up from the back, tinged with despair. "What if we lose everything?" Jake met the eyes of the person who spoke, feeling the weight of their concern. "What if we don't try?" he countered. "What if we surrender? That's a failure too. We can't give in to despair. We need to fight." Their eyes locked, and the young man nodded slowly. There was something in the air, an unspoken agreement. "Who else with us?" Jake shouted, raising his arms. The murmurs of doubt faded into shouts of agreement and determination. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside, rattling the windows. The door of the cabin, they now stood protected and trembled under the impact. Fear prickled at Jake's skin, but he met it head-on. He clenched his fists, feeling adrenaline coursing through him. "Whatever happens, we stay together," he yelled, invigorated by courage and defiance. "They may think they're unstoppable, but they'll find we're not so easily broken." As they bolstered their defenses, a fierce energy ignited. Outside, the shadows moved closer, and an unsettling calm descended like the eye of the storm. But even as cheer transformed into wariness, Clara caught Jake's gaze. She knew he knew that whatever happened next would shape not only their future, but also the fate of their community. "Ready for the fight?" she whispered, her voice a mix of steel and softness. Jake nodded, feeling both fear and hope mingling inside him. "Always." With one last look at their makeshift home, Jake prepared himself. They were no longer just a community. They were a family bonded by necessity. Together, they would face the danger that loomed at their door. But as they took position, ready to stand their ground, a voice rang out over the darkened woods. Come out wherever you are. We know you're in there." Jake's breath caught in his throat. The game was on, and the real fight had just begun. What would be the price of their freedom, and would they even be able to survive the night ahead? The pounding on the door reverberated through the cabin, each thud echoing Jake's racing heartbeat. Shadows danced frantically outside the windows, their movements erratic and menacing. Clara stepped closer to him, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and fierce determination. "Focus!" Jake commanded, rallying their group. "We stick to the plan. Everyone, take your positions." They had hastily barricaded the door with anything they could find, chairs, tables, even crates from a forgotten corner. The makeshift blockade was weak, but it was all they had. They knew every minute they held out would give them time to think, to fight. Jake the newcomer's voice was strained. He was pacing, still on edge. "They've been watching us. They know there are more of you here." He pointed to the windows. "If they break through, we need a way out. A backup plan." Jake's mind raced. "Clara, do you remember the old tunnel by the supply shed?" Clara's face lit up with recognition. "Yeah, we could use that to escape if it comes to it." "Good. We'll set up a diversion. It's risky, but it could buy us time," Jake explained, looking around the room eager for their agreement. "I need volunteers to distract them at the front." Silence befell the room, tension hanging in the air like thick fog. Finally, a young woman named Mariah stepped forward, her jaw set. "I'll go. I won't just sit here and wait." Jake's heart swelled at the bravery he saw in her. "Thank you, Mariah. Your courage is what we need right now." The conversations flowed, a whisper of plans being made, strategies discussed, and hopes ignited. The hunters outside continued their taunts, their laughter chilling Jake's blood. Each ribbing call felt like nails against his resolve. They weren't just threatening them. They were mocking the very way of life they had fought so hard to build. "Think they can scare us? We're not afraid of the likes of them," Clara shouted, her voice slicing through the fear that had begun to suffocate the room. A palpable energy filled the cabin as Jake rallied the others. They knew the danger was real, but so was their passion and drive. They weren't going to let it end like this. Jake glanced at the barricaded door again, just as a figure loomed outside the window. Fear shot through him, and he jumped, instinct urging him to protect. "Everyone to your positions," he shouted. They moved quickly, taking their spots with military precision, the ones who would hold the line, and the brave souls like Mariah readying for their risky mission. She caught Jake's eye one last time before slipping toward the nearest exit. "Keep them safe, Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will. Just come back," he urged, although he knew the chance of that was slim. Outside, the shadows grew restless as the hunters grew impatient. The pounding on the door had yet to relent. Each impact thrummed through Jake's core, a reminder of just what they stood to lose. They were stronger than fear, and they had a home worth fighting for. With a deep breath, he pushed his back against the wall, preparing for the onslaught, fueled by a fierce desire to protect those he loved. But just as he felt ready, the shackles of uncertainty crept back in. Was it enough? Would their makeshift defenses hold? Then came the sound, a crack, loud and foreboding, as the door groaned with the weight of something bigger than them. The moment of truth was upon them. Jake chanced to look at Clara. "No matter what happens, stick together. We are more than just a community." Before she could respond, the door splintered, the tension bursting like a bubble, leaving them only moments to face the storm that awaited. With a roar from outside, the first of the hunters burst through the door, and Jake stood poised to confront whatever darkness lay beyond. The price of their freedom was about to be revealed. How far would they go to protect what mattered most? The door shattered with a deafening crack, like thunder rolling over the hills. Jake's heart pounded furiously in his chest as he faced the dark figure that invaded their sanctuary. The air filled with tension, the heavy weight of fear contrasting against the fierce determination in the heart surrounding him. "Hold your ground," Jake roared, the instinct to protect igniting something primal within him. A tall figure stepped into the cabin, silhouetted against the swirling chaos outside. It was the same man who had mocked them moments before, his face twisted in a menacing grin. "This is your last chance," he spat, his voice dripping with menace. "Surrender, and you may yet keep something from this place." Sarah, a mother of 3, stood firm beside Jake, her shoulders squared, her resolve shining like armor. "What do you want from us?" she yelled, her voice as steady as her stance. "We're not backed into a corner. We fight for our home." The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Jake's spine. "Home? You think you built something worth fighting for? This place is nothing but ashes and lost dreams. You're all just clinging to fantasies." Jake felt fury swelling up. "You don't know us. You don't know what we've fought through, what we've built." Behind him, the crowd stirred, shifting their weight like soldiers reinforcing their lines. Clara elbowed her way to the front, her spirit almost palpable in the air. "Do what you will," she shouted defiantly, "but we won't let you dictate our future. Every one of us will stand together." Suddenly, a crashing sound erupted, and Mariah burst through the door from outside, breathless but alive. "They're coming!" I led them away for a moment, but it won't hold. Panic flashed in her eyes, and Jake felt adrenaline spike. "Everyone!" he called, gathering his remaining courage. "If we're going to stand a chance, we need to work as one. We're stronger together." The air crackled with tension as he scanned the room. Every face reflected the same fear he felt, yet intertwined with fierce conviction. "Here's what we do," Jake explained swiftly, breaking it down. "We hold the line at the door, while a few of us stay hidden in the back. If they break through, we push them back together. Mariah can lead to safety through the tunnel if it comes to that." With the plan taking shape, there was a charged determination that surged through the air. "This ends tonight," Clara shouted, rallying the others, and for a moment, their collective strength roared like wildfire. Jake felt his heart swell as he met every eye, each person ready to make a stand. As the hunters crashed against the door again, threatening to collapse the barricade. Their footsteps thundered with impatience. "You think you can hold this?" The tall man taunted again, his voice a cruel whisper that clawed at Jake's spirit. "You're in over your heads." "Maybe so," Jake shouted back, his voice fiercer than any inside him had ever been. "But we're not afraid to fight." Suddenly, the door splintered again, and a cacophony of sound emerged. Wooden fragments flew in all directions as the hunters charged through the opening. It felt surreal that reality was no longer just a struggle for a home. It had morphed into a fight for their very lives. "Now!" Jake called as the first hunter lunged inside. With a surge of unity, the townsfolk threw themselves against the invaders, a wall of determination slamming against the wave of chaos. Clara was next to Jake, her strength bolstering him as they pushed back, elbows flying, fists colliding. But the hunters were relentless. Power surged through Jake's muscles as he confronted their leader, fists raised. "This is our home. You will not take it." And then, to Jake's surprise, he noticed something flickering in the chaos. Ray, the shadowy man who had once taunted them, stood at the periphery, surveying the confrontation. Though he had been an antagonist, Jake could sense a willingness to help. "Together!" Ray shouted suddenly as he rushed forward, launching himself into the fray. His presence, unexpected yet powerful, shifted the tide. The momentum of their struggle transformed a rallying cry spun from desperate anger into a symphony of solidarity. One by one, the townsfolk pressed closer together, their strength igniting like a beacon against the dark tide. Jake felt energy flowing between them, each blow and each shout resonating with a collective heartbeat. The overwhelming adversaries began to falter, or perhaps they had underestimated the fierce spirit encased within this small Appalachian town, how deeply they cared for each other, how strong their ties were. With a final shove, Jake felt exhilaration as the last hunter stumbled backward, crashing into his comrades. Then all at once, the door swung open. "Go now!" Clara yelled urgently, pushing people towards the back corridor where the tunnel lay. The urgency of escape broke through fear, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Together!" Jake shouted again, gathering those near him to forge ahead. The steady humidity of hope illuminated the darkness, and they fled into the safety that lay beyond, eyes wide with fear yet bright with hope. From the safety of the tunnel, Jake glanced back, his heart heavy yet buoyed by the weight of their unified spirits. The shadows outside retreated, their threats sputtering like embers in the night. They had stood against an invincible darkness and fought not just for their homes, but for each other. In the quiet hush of the woods, a collective breath hung heavy in the air as they emerged, dirt-streaked and weary yet victorious. Jake turned to Clara, meeting her resolute gaze. "We did it. Together." A miraculous sunlight peeked over the rugged hills, illuminating the world anew, offering a promise of hope that ran deeper than the scars of their battle. With tears of joy shimmering in his eyes, Jake smiled, knowing that they had not just built hidden cabins, they had constructed a family. As the echoes of confrontation faded into whispers, the spirit of the mountains cradled their hearts. They stood together, stronger than before, resolute in their journey ahead. Now is the moment, friends. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel and not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and share in your excitement about this incredible journey. Comment your reactions and feelings about this heart-pounding ending. Let us keep the conversation going. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions. Let us do it together.